What happens when sculpture, architecture, interior design, and quilting all meet in one creative mind? My guest today moves between strength of form, materiality, and attention to detail, creating work that feels modern and thoughtful. From designing hotel interiors to making award-winning art quilts, her creative path is fueled by curiosity. This episode is going to spark some ideas. Today, I'll have a chat with Carson Converse. Hello, and welcome to the Quilter on Fire podcast. I'm Brandy Maslowski, a former firefighter turned quilt professional. As a quilt teacher, speaker, and judge, I travel the globe to bring quilters more joy and less overwhelm. Not too long ago, the quilty life I now lead was just a dream. After many lessons and a lot of hard work, I've transitioned from juggling a day job and a quilting business on the side to becoming a full-time quiltpreneur. I started the Quilter on Fire podcast to create a vibrant community of quilters, artists, and makers. Each episode brings you inspiring stories, insights, and the pure joy of guests from all over the world. If their stories uplift you and spark joy, you're in the right place. Let's dive in and ignite that creative fire within you. My guest today is Carson Converse, an artist and designer whose work lives right at the intersection of dynamic modern sensibility and grounded in tradition. Carson originally studied sculpture at Boston University before going on to earn a master's degree in interior design from the New England School of Art and Design. That mix of artistic training and design thinking shows up beautifully in everything she creates. From hotel interiors to award-winning modern art quilts, her work is thoughtful and bold with a strong sense of form, beautiful materials, and a real attention to detail. When I look at the detail shots of her work or get the chance to see a Carson Converse quilt in person, I just pore over the fine details. I can't wait for this conversation, so let's explore the story of Carson Converse. Carson, welcome to the show.
Hello, I'm really happy to be here.
I'm so glad to have this conversation with you. There's so many wonderful things to explore. I like to start by taking a look back at where you got started. So when do you first remember putting stitch to fabric?
Well, I was quite young when I was introduced to quilts. My first memory is in probably kindergarten. There was this little tiny portable design wall, and the instructor had cut out pieces of fabric, little half square triangles and squares. And one of the activities was kind of moving them around on the board. And I remember loving it. And so at that point, my mother then encouraged me to learn how to draft quilt patterns on graph paper. And so I made my first, I didn't actually sew, but I designed the first quilt in about kindergarten. And then I was interested in textiles, and I did some home sewing, a lot of clothing, but I didn't make my first quilt until after I graduated from college.
Oh, so can you tell us a little bit about that first quilt?
Yeah, well, I guess actually, when I was in college, I was a rower, and my coach decided that as a fundraiser that each of my teammates should make a block, a quilt block, and that we would each make one and it would be sewn together into a quilt. And so that was senior year. And that sort of got me back involved in quilting. And then as soon as I graduated, I decided I was going to make something for my bed. It was horrendous. It was absolutely horrendous. I started, first of all, self-taught at the time. I was using cardboard templates. The geometry of my templates was wrong. Tiny itty bitty little traditional blocks. And I wanted to make a queen size quilt.
Yeah.
And I think after 2 hours, I was just so bored and this is going to take forever. And it was shortcut after shortcut after shortcut. I decided to float these 6 blocks that I made in a big field of fabric, but I floated like pretty white blocks on a really dark, heavy burgundy background. And then I was going to hand quilt the whole thing and make it really interesting. And that was going to take forever. And so I machine stitched in the ditch, didn't call it done. So it was terrible.
Yeah. And I think we all have that one thing we started off with that felt horrendous, right?
Yeah.
So tell me, you mentioned your mom. So were
Mhm.
there other, certain people in your life that had a creative impact early on?
Yeah, I think both my parents, my mother was very into sort of crafts. So she sewed our clothing, she made ornaments, things like that. My father actually went to school for sculpture and landscape design, and then he was a contractor. So I grew up, he was always building things. He built our house, grew up with a lot of art supplies. So we were always encouraged to be creative and make things.
Yeah. So tell us the story of your educational path and your career that led to your current art practice.
Well, I went to school. Actually, in high school, it was more in a STEM track, and luckily, I ended up going to an arts camp, and the counselors there really encouraged me to explore arts as a profession, or at least more seriously. And so I ended up applying to art school. I thought I was going to be a graphic designer, and then I got there, and it was clear that I was really more interested in three-dimensional objects. I really excelled in sculpture, and I was terrible in graphic design. But I didn't, art school, particularly at least the school that I was in, they didn't set you up to be able to actually make a living um, as an artist. So when I graduated, I had no clue what to do. And I think, I ended up floating a little bit. I actually worked for a moving company. And what I ended up doing, just to pay the bills, and then that's where quilting sort of entered in, because it was something that I could do in my apartment. I didn't need in a sculpture studio. I would have needed external space. It's dirty. It's heavy. It would have been expensive. Quilting is something I could do in my apartment,
Mhm.
even if it's shared with a roommate or I'm moving every year. So it sort of started to work its way in, and then I ended up going back to grad school in order to be able to pay my bills and do something creative. But quilting just kept coming back. So anytime I was stressed, I found myself quilting. My thesis for my interior design program was actually on quilts. So I was actually able to study quilts and think about how they relate to architecture. And in the meantime, I'm making quilts. Anytime I'm not studying, I'm making quilts. When I'm looking for a job, I'm making quilts. When the recession hit, which was shortly after I graduated, and I couldn't find a job in interior design, I decided I might as well make quilts and try to make something for my portfolio. And what ended up happening is, because I was in school for interior design and I worked in the hospitality industry where branding is a big part of that and product design is a big part of that. And so I decided that since I wasn't able to get a job, I would put together my own brand and create a product. And the product I could create was quilts. And so I created the branding, I created an Etsy shop. And that is actually how I started doing it professionally. And then found a job in interior design again, let that go. And then the art part sort of started working itself into, slipping back into the point where I decided that I wanted to just be a full-time artist and step away from my career in interior design.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story. And so, how did your art grow and change, like your quilting style change over time?
Well, initially, it was much like many people, I was really trying lots of different things. So I would see somebody's technique, I would mimic it a bit, very traditional. When I tried to do a brand, I started thinking about what would look good online. It was very poppy. It was still traditional. There was a lot of equilateral triangle quilts, kind of Red Cross type quilts, in brighter, more Scandinavian colors. And that thinking about that really shifted. Previously, my work was all over the place, but trying to create a cohesive brand really sort of started getting me thinking about a body of work. And then from there, actually, partly because what I was making was really easy to copy, and there started being sort of, very similar quilts popping up for sale. That really pushed me to think about, what do I want to say? What represents me as a person and my interests? So instead of trying to do a brand with a very specific sales goal, I really started thinking about, what do I look like in a quilt, and trying to bring that together. And that's really where some of the minimalism starts to come in and more of the graphic shapes.
Yeah, it really sounds like you're on a search to find your voice, perhaps. And
Yes.
was that kind of a defining moment when you kind of felt like, okay, I'm creating a brand, I'm finding my voice. Maybe I can actually do this for a living.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay, so let's take a step out of the story for a moment and find out, where are you living now and who are your loved ones that you share your world with every day?
So I am in Western Massachusetts in a small town called Shelburne Falls. I live with two dogs and a husband. Um, and yeah, that's it, in the woods.
Okay. When I talk to people about design on every podcast, we're looking general at first. So I want to start with, when you see something in the world that sparks an idea for you, how do you capture that? Are you pencil to paper? Do you go digital immediately? Do you throw fabric on the wall? What's your process?
I don't have a set process. I do oftentimes just throw fabric on the wall. I do a lot of what I call thumbnail sketches, so very sort of very quick scribbles. Just it's almost more to have my hand work, sort of hand brain connection.
Mm-hmm.
I do sometimes use a computer. I tend to use a computer later, so I'll start throwing some shapes on the wall, or I'll start drawing, and then once there's something there, I'll oftentimes go back to the computer to refine it, or sometimes make a pattern piece. But it's really based on, each quilt has its own process depending on what it wants to be.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love that idea of thumbnail sketches, because you can literally throw a dozen sketches down and just really explore the ideas, and one might really stand out for you, right?
Yeah, yeah, and that's what it's quilts take so long that I'm trying to do some processes to try to get as many ideas out, so that when I start spending hundreds of hours on one object, I've hopefully that's the best in that group at least.
Yeah, so true. Okay, so where do you pull your color inspiration from?
I think it's emotional. I think sometimes I remember once I woke up and I very clearly knew I wanted to work with blue. And
Mhm.
I can't tell you why. I just knew I wanted to work with blue. So I'm looking for something that just really has a resonance, almost a harmony, and something that excites me. But a lot of it is from just putting two colors next to each other and paying attention to what sort of feels right for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I see your work, I absolutely love the color always. But the thing that really draws me in to take a closer look is the addition of stitch. So, how does that transform your work?
Well, I think about the stitching almost as if I had a big shift. I'll word it this way. I had a big shift when I stopped thinking about making quilts and I started thinking about making textiles.
Mm.
And for me, there was an aspect of the stitching really becoming, not just being on top, but really being part of the cloth itself.
Mm.
And so a lot of times when I'm stitching, I'm almost thinking about like a shot cloth where you have woven, where the warp and weft are creating the secondary color.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking about ways that I can actually alter the fabric with the thread color, and really have it all sort of blend and become one.
Oh, that's a really cool concept. So you're referring to like the shot cottons that had that sheen when
Mm-hmm.
when the threads were woven in the different directions to create a whole third kind of color effect, or even fourth. That's really
Exactly.
cool.
And I think the more different the colors are, the more interesting it is. Like I really like the shot cloths where you have a green and a red that sort of becomes this brown. Like I just think that's very interesting. So
Yeah. Okay, so tell us a little bit about the themes you like to explore in your work.
it's a lot of what I am working on is also related to issues that I'm thinking about. So sometimes I'm not necessarily thinking about it immediately, but it comes out because I'm thinking about it as I work on the piece. Feminism is a big aspect of that. Also, a slowing down. So I think everything's moving really quickly right now. Technology's moving really quickly, and I really am trying to make work that is sort of a little bit of a resistance to that, reminding myself that it's okay if it takes a really long time, trying to, it's funny because as we started viewing at things on Instagram in these little 4-inch grids, I started making work that cannot be viewed on Instagram. It really, you have to be in front of it. You have to see it from different angles. You have to be able to move back away from it and then come look at it closely. But that's something that I'm sort of intentionally trying to explore, is that depth and ways of trying to create an experience as you view a piece.
Yeah, and you can see it on your website. The gorgeous photography on there is incredible. But every time you do see a close-up shot, you just want to see it in person. Like, is that for real? Right. So, yeah, fascinating. I love that part of the story of what you explore, because it's almost like you're exploring your life through quilts, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so what compels you to work in a series? Because many of the quilts that you've put out into the world are numbered or they're in a series. So tell us what gets you to make another one.
Well, I think for me, inspiration, the phrase that sometimes uses, once you get the cogwheel moving, it's hard when you first start trying to come up with something, but then once it's moving, it's actually much easier to keep going. And for me, a series, it's much easier to continue with the series than it is to come up with a completely new idea. And each time I make a piece, there's some thread that I want to follow to the next piece. So what if I had used a different color stitch? What if the lines were an inch apart instead of 3/4 of an inch apart? So there's always some other version of a quilt that I'm working on that could have also been a quilt that I want to see. So that's one reason. Sometimes, to be honest, I cheat and I just use series names because I'm not good at titling things, and I just put it in the same series. But for the most part, it is that continuation of an idea. And also, I like making work that is in conversation with one another, and thinking about them being viewed all together instead of just this one object.
Yeah,
So thinking about the relationships between quilts.
yeah, I love it, because sometimes a quilt will just open a conversation, and it's nice to keep exploring that conversation until you feel like, yeah, we've covered it. So that's good. Okay, great. So speaking of names, you named your business Carson Converse. So
Yes.
what's in a title? Tell us what's in a title.
Well, it's my name. But I did actually try, particularly when I had the brand, I tried to come up with a different name. I'm not good with names. So after several days of workshopping different ideas, I stuck with my name. And now I'm primarily doing art, and it makes sense to have it be my name.
Well,
But
yeah.
I do think there's a little bit of a freedom sometimes in not having it be tied so directly to you. So there are times I wish I had been a little bit more creative with words.
Well, and it is such a great name. The alliteration and everything all combined into one. It does sound really great. Okay, so what do you bring to the world with your business in a nutshell?
Well, I think primarily now as an artist, I am focusing on the work itself. I'm trying to make the best work that I possibly can in thinking about being part of the historical dialogue. So thinking about, can I make something that somebody else is going to look at and then be inspired to make sort of the next version of it? And for me, it's going to museums is something that I really like to do, and I've always liked to do. And I remember just standing in front of some of the objects in museums and thinking about the maker and being inspired by what they created. And I guess I hope that I make work that will sometime in the future be in that museum, and that some person will look at and that will inspire them.
Yeah, putting your work out to the world. So it's one thing to put your work out into the world and to carve a business out for yourself, but it's another thing to start entering contests and QuiltCon and things like that. So tell us about the experience where you first put your quilts, your art quilts, into a show.
Well, I had been, prior to entering shows, I hadn't showed my work to anybody. I had some stuff online, and then I took probably a 3-year break where I wasn't posting anything. I had never shown my work to another quilter. So I just really didn't know. I had no concept of how they were going to be received. I felt okay design wise, given my background, but as far as construction, I really didn't know what to expect. So it was a little bit scary. and then ultimately, it's worked out okay.
Yeah, it certainly has. So was the first show you entered Quilt National and then
It
you tried?
was, yeah.
Yeah. So you didn't get into Quilt National right away?
Correct. I did not get into Quilt National the first time I applied. I had also applied for a book opportunity that I didn't get into, and then I applied to QuiltCon. 2016 was the first one I entered.
Okay, so we're going to dive into those quilts and that experience a little bit later, but you've had a few dream moments you'd never imagined displaying your work. So tell us the story of Hermes.
When a little bit before that, when I was leaving interior design, there was a moment where I remember looking at a magazine, and there was a glass artisan that I had always admired. And I looked at this magazine, and she was describing her experience with Hermes. And I just had this moment where I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to be the type of craftsperson where I can work with a company like Hermes. But I was so far away. That idea of being able to do that was just crazy to me at the time, because I'm very much an introvert. I hadn't shown my work yet. And then a few years later, I get an email from Hermes asking if they want to collaborate.
Wow.
So, and there's some things that I did to position for that, as far as I had that sort of client in mind when I created my website. Anytime I put public information out there, I'm thinking about that sort of opportunity, but really did not, I didn't actively pursue it. And what I ended up, I've worked with them on 2 collaborations so far. In those particular collaborations, they've sent artwork. Both times it was by an artist named Giampaolo Pagni. And so then my job was sort of interpreting that artwork into a quilt and actually making the quilt. So sort of figuring out how to take somebody's line drawing and how to make that into a quilt.
Wow, that's like a dream come true creative prompt, right?
Yeah, it was amazing. And the materials are amazing. They ended up showing in Milan as part of their big show at the salon in Milan. So it was really a pretty amazing experience.
Wow, that is cool. So does that mean that like you were at home and this was happening from afar, or did you actually go there?
I didn't go, yeah.
No, so you were able to
looking
sort of
at it
hear
through
about
Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of cool though. Okay, great. And then so there was also an experience with Salon plus Art. No, what is it called? Tell me. In New York.
Let's see, Salon Art plus Design in New York.
Salon Art plus Design New York Gallery. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so I'm represented by a gallery. It's Liz O'Brien in New York, and they have a booth at the Salon Art Plus Design show. And so a show like that has multiple booths with different vendors, and they have brought my work there. I think it's been 3 years. I'm not 2 to 3 years. And that is another show, because that's the type of show that when I was working in New York as an interior designer, particularly a junior level, entry level interior designer, you'd go to the shows, you'd see the booths, and it just felt so foreign and far away that you would actually have work in the show. So it was a really a nice sort of full circle moment to then be in one of the booths and having work in the booth.
Yeah, it's so fascinating that those seeds were kind of planted in your head when you saw the magazine about Hermes, and then you're at those shows where you just thought, oh, this is so far out of the realm of possibility. But the seeds were there, right? So
the seeds were there. Somehow I didn't pay attention in the middle, and then I was like, oh, I'm here. So it was nice. Yeah.
Okay, let's take a look for a few minutes at your website. So if people are listening right now and they want to go there, it's carsonconverse.com. So what kind of things will we find on your website?
Well, there's a gallery of quilts, which is broken into 2 sections just by size. So sort of mid to large size. And then if you scroll down, there's some smaller ones just to try to visually separate them. And then there's a gallery of smaller quilts, which some of them are more embroideries, but they're really small. So there's most of the ones that are there now, I believe, are 6" by 6". Mm-hmm. And again, just visually separating scale. And then there's a gallery of a series called Deconstructed, which was quilt based, but not technically quilts.
Yeah.
There's the option, there's a shop where there's a selection of work that you can buy directly through me, about page. And then if you scroll down to the footer, there's two sections. There's multiple sections, but two that might be interesting are exhibitions, which are any upcoming shows, as well as lectures and workshops.
Okay.
So where I'm teaching, that information is down there.
Yeah, so great. And so we're looking at the gallery with quilts, deconstructed series, small works. Can you tell us a little bit about what it means to be deconstructed, in case someone's never heard that word before?
Well, I literally made a quilt and then I cut it up. And in this case, I cut them into 1-inch squares and that I then cut into half square triangles. So they're little tiny triangles that are sewn to canvas, but it was literally deconstructing a quilt in order to make the piece. So
yeah, and it can come up with a really cool effect, right? So let's just move into a quick note on some new work that you're coming up with that's not perhaps on the website yet, and that is exploration of works on panels. So describe that to us.
Yeah, so I got a long arm in 2019, and that's really shifted my work. And I've been thinking about using it in two different ways. One is as a drawing tool and almost like a printer where I'm printing out one color of thread and another color of thread to produce drawings. Mm-hmm. And then the other one is sort of sculpting fabric, which is, a traditional whole cloth quilt. You're essentially using quilting lines to sculpt fabric. Mm-hmm. And so I'm using the long arm to create this sort of sculpted fabric or fabric that has just really dense stitching to create color. And then I am treating that with acrylic medium, which actually makes it very rigid. And then from there, I can either apply that to a panel to make it a hard object, or I can cut it up and start collaging with it. So it sort of opens up the possibilities of what I can do with quilted cloth.
Yeah.
And I've been exploring using metallic leaf and paint on top of the quilts too in that capacity. So
it just sounds like you're taking whatever inspires you in the moment and just following kind of your creativity, right? I love it.
Yeah, there's a lot of what ifs. I really like kind of I like the exploration of possibilities in the process.
Yeah. And it kind of reminds me of a little moment I had. I was taking a class one time and we were to use paper towel to sort of paint and figure out and it ended up that this little drop cloth of paper towel was the thing I wanted to use in my art piece the most. I was like, I like this better than the art I'm actually making. But yeah, I love that you're just exploring naturally. It's almost like you're just following your joy. Okay, so, and everything that you make is for sale because you are a living, working artist. So I encourage you right now to grab a cup of tea, wrap yourself in a quilt, and go to the galleries and click on that collect buttons where you can see everything that's for sale on Carson's website. But if you're looking for workshops, like Carson mentioned, scroll to the bottom. There's a tab down, there's a line down there that says lectures and workshops. You also have a newsletter. So tell me how often do you put that out once in a while? Is it kind of a working thing for you that you're trying to get out to the world once in a while?
Yeah, I have a newsletter sign up, which maybe by the time this airs, I will have a newsletter. Yeah. But it is something that is near the top of my list. Most likely will at most be once a month, or if there's some news to share. So I will not be emailing you all the time. Yeah. But ideally, that would be the primary way that I would communicate with people. I know a lot of people have been kicked off Instagram recently. So just if you're interested in hearing from me, that's probably the best way to ensure that you're going to get news from me.
Yeah, that sounds great.
At least once I, get around to.
Yeah, and when Carson gets her act together, you'll be the first to know, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. Okay, let's talk a little bit about travel. So what have been some quilt travel highlights as a teacher or speaker?
Well, as teacher or speaker, Madeline Island, I had an opportunity to teach there, chat with Malka Dubrowski and Irene Roderick. And that Madeline Island is just a sort of magical place. it's a pain to get up there, but once you're there, it's just so beautiful. It's secluded, and you can really focus on the work. So that was really a wonderful experience. And then just as a participant, QuiltCon has really sort of opened up community, and I've met many wonderful people who I consider some of my best friends there. So.
Yeah, well, and those are some wonderful teachers you mentioned that you were teaching with, and you're doing that again in the future. But QuiltCon has also been a big part of the quilting experience for you. So have you been a teacher or speaker there?
I taught 1 year. Yeah, I taught 3 courses. I actually had a pretty full load the 1 year that I taught, and that was wonderful too. But people are exhausted at QuiltCon. It's a different style of teaching. I had one person fall asleep in my class just because it was like 8 o'clock at night, and QuiltCon is so much. They just, it's just a lot. So,
okay. Well, tell us what you love to teach. What are your most popular workshops?
I love to teach design, and I like sort of helping people discover their own style and then sort of refine that. So I prefer longer format workshops where students kind of bring in their own style, and then I kind of work longer format so that I can get to know each student and what they're interested in, and then work with them to kind of push their own boundaries and try to push their creativity, but within what they're interested in doing.
Yeah, that sounds really good. And do you teach live only, or do you teach on Zoom sometimes, or on demand, or anything like that?
At the moment, I teach live only, but I will lecture on Zoom.
Okay, so let's talk about a few of your lectures.
Sure, yeah. So I currently have 4 that I sort of prepared to lecture on. I have two versions of a trunk show. So the first trunk show is Origins and Inspiration. And so that trunk show is really more of really starts at the beginning of my work and includes a lot of other people's work. So I'm really mapping out a lot of my influences in the way that shows up in my work today. Mm-hmm. And so it's a way of me thanking and acknowledging people that have contributed to my work, and also really showing how we can take in inspiration and take parts of it without it necessarily literally being another person's work.
Yeah.
And then the other trunk show is more recent work, and there's more time to talk about the quilts themselves. So I pick some of my favorite quilts and really dive into those quilts. I have a lecture on minimalism. There's a version of this. If you're a Modern Quilt Guild member, there is a version in their online programming. It's about 20 minutes. And what I've done is I've expanded that because 20 minutes is not much time to talk about minimalism. Yeah. And then I have factors to consider when pricing a quilt. Yeah. And this is a little bit more specialized. It talks about what to think about when you're pricing a quilt, but it's also really, I think there's so much that goes into the price of everything we buy that we don't understand. And so it really talks about the way pricing works. And so I think in addition to helping us think about how we should value our own work, it also has information that can help us be better consumers as we buy things as well.
Yeah, so great. Those topics are wonderful. So if you're a part of a modern guild, these would be great trunk shows and topics. But also, if you're in a traditional guild, but you have members who are really interested in the modern conversations, this could be really great. And especially if people are starting to think, okay, I'm making quilts that are, I want to start selling things and learning about that even. Such great topics. And of course, if you're the program coordinator, like I mentioned, or in talent acquisition at your guild, reach out through the website. So you can simply click on the contact tab. You'll see Carson's email right there. You can go and check it out and send her a note. So Carson, is there a quilt or quilt project that's been most memorable for you?
It depends on the day, like what I'm thinking about. I think no, sorry.
No, it sounds like you have a common answer that we get for this question on the podcast is whatever I'm currently working on is my, and so it kind of sounds like you're a bit stumped because it's all good.
Each one has something that's memorable, but it ends up all blending together. So.
Yeah. And people ask me often, what's your favorite guest on the podcast? And I'm like, that's the impossible question.
Yeah,
Like every single person I've ever talked to has been an incredible story. So I
that's a
hear
good
you. I hear
analogy.
you.
Yeah.
Okay. So in your creative practice, what brings you joy?
I like seeing something that's been in my head only come and become an object that I can see. There's something about sort of proving that or disproving that something works. So really that sort of chasing an idea and then seeing it come to life is what pulls me forward.
Yeah. And that's probably part of what makes you such a prolific quilter. You're actually putting your head down, doing the work, and you're chasing that feeling, right? I love it. Okay, so right now we're going to take a quick break. And then when we come back, we're going to talk all about Carson's studio space, some of the quilts, of course, and what's coming soon on her teaching schedule. We'll be right back. They say measure twice, cut once. Do you measure twice, cut once, and somehow it's still wrong? Introducing the Go Bolt Electric Fabric Cutter. It cuts accurate pieces every time, and you can cut an entire quilt in under 10 minutes. So maybe it's time to stop fighting with your ruler and just start sewing. Check out the Go Bolt Electric Fabric Cutter at AccuQuilt.com. And we are back with Carson Converse. Carson, can you tell us about your studio space? Where do you create?
Yeah, so I have two spaces. I have a small guest bedroom at my home where I do a lot of my office work. It's also where I paint when I'm doing messier processes like painting or dyeing fabric. And then I recently, or I think 2021, I started renting an external studio space that's about 10 minutes from my home. And that is in an old knife factory. And I have about 900 square feet and big 13-foot ceilings. And so that's where my long arm lives. I have some big work tables, really big design walls, really big northern windows. So that's where now I do most of the actual quilting.
Wow, that sounds like a dream come true. So how did having that new creative space change things for you?
Everything's gotten bigger. In the guest room, I have a 8-foot by 8-foot design wall, but that butts up to ceiling floor walls.
Yeah.
Whereas in the other space, I have an 8-foot by 8-foot, and then I have a 12-foot by 8-foot, but I can extend past that.
Yeah.
It's just such a big space. Everything looks small in it. And I'm not tripping over myself. So it's really huge to have space to breathe. And it's really important to me to have lots of different pieces, see lots of different pieces at once. So I work on a lot of pieces at once. So just to have the space to be able to see multiple projects is really been huge.
Yeah. And that just leads me to another question about, speaking of having an artist's practice, do you kind of show up to this studio space whenever your heart desires, or do you have specific hours like this is my thing, I've got to be here 9 to 5?
To be honest, it's been a struggle. I worked better when it was home based. I outgrew it.
Yeah.
But it's been hard my best hours are in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Right when I wake up to about 11, I oftentimes don't make it to the studio until noon because I end up doing the things that I can do at home in my best hours because I'm not ready to leave the house yet.
Yeah.
So it's been a little bit of a struggle because I did used to work really early, really late, and that's been hard. But I do try to treat it like a job and make sure I show up.
Yeah. So speaking of those morning hours, what is your favorite time of day?
I would say morning. Yeah.
Okay. And what's the best thing you do for your own self-care?
I do a lot of different things. I mean, I like being outdoors, whether it's running, walking the dogs, really just hanging out with my dogs is great for self-care.
Yeah.
And then I like kind of treasure hunting. So like looking through thrift stores or auctions, there's just that sort of exploration, kind of getting lost and just looking at things. I find very relaxing.
Yeah, I love all of those things. Okay, so let's get into the conversation. I'm so excited, I can't even. Let's get into the conversation about the quilts. So let's start with the other side. So this is a 2016 quilt that was entered into QuiltCon. And I have a little note here that you thought it was boring. So tell me a little
Yeah.
bit about that story.
So this, the quilt in general, in this period of time, I was doing a lot of work where I was exploring the interaction between two shapes. And so particularly a lot of triangles, and then thinking about the quilt as a rectangle. So the actual edges of the quilt was a rectangle, and then thinking about triangles inserting themselves in, and what does the negative space look like? How does it feel if it's upside down? Is the point down? Is it up? And so the other side was part of that series, and it was my least favorite that I made. I thought it was a little bit plain.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a rule that I force myself to finish everything and not judge it until it's complete. And so I decided to just quilt it. And that's where I realized that how important the quilting is, because especially if you have a lot of negative space, the quilting adds so much texture and interest. And so it was really an important lesson in don't judge it until it's finished. Keep going.
Yeah, and the results were incredible because it was featured on the banner at the quilt show. It went on to travel with QuiltCon show. And which award did it win?
It was that one got the Quilting Excellence Award.
Yeah, so that just tells you that, it's not finished until it's quilted, and
bound.
Yeah, don't judge it before it's done. Okay, I love that you have, this rule for yourself that, yes, I need to finish things. There's so many UFOs in my studio, I can't even tell you, but I think that's a really good rule to have for yourself. Okay, and the next one I want to chat about is a series called Passage. So Passage number 3 in 2019 won first place in minimalist design. So tell us about that quilt.
So Passage number 3, that particular quilt was, or I should say the Passage series is a series of horizontal lines. They may be pieced. They all feature contrasting stitching. So the joining feature is these horizontal bands, repetitive horizontal bands. Passage number 3 featured a darker color palette. There was a burgundy and then I think it was a fuchsia pink inset pieced line, and then quilting lines in a sort of magenta. And the interesting thing for me, at least in the Passage series, is the way that when I first began Passage, I thought it was going to be a group of quilts that all were very close together, where there was just a small shift. And so it was an exploration on what if you change just one thread color, or if that line is a 1/4 inch and it goes up to a 1/2 inch, like what are the visual shifts with these small little changes?
Yeah.
But because of the way time works, and because it's now extended over 10 years, my style's changed. My ability to make things has changed. And so instead it's become this series where you can actually sort of track my development through the series.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating. And so a couple of years later, Passage number 5 was in QuiltCon as well, and it won first place in minimalist design. But tell me about the part where it was acquired by a museum.
Yeah, well, it's at the International Quilt Study Center in Lincoln, Nebraska, which was very exciting. And the funny thing about that quilt, too, is that it was just a warm-up. I was actually planning another quilt that I was going to use a wool it cost a little bit of money, and I couldn't decide what the perfect color spacing was. And so I grabbed this wool off my shelf that I didn't particularly like. I hadn't paid money for it. I had inherited it. And I just threw it on the long arm. I made quick decisions, and that was the piece that ended up, going to QuiltCon and being finished. So sometimes I can labor over work and it just never happens. And sometimes you just got to jump in and make more and hope for the best. So
yeah. And so when a museum acquires your piece, does that mean they purchase it from you and then it lives there forever?
Yeah. So in this case, they purchased it while it was at QuiltCon, and it's part of their modern quilt collection. So it was one of many quilts that they purchased at QuiltCon.
Cool. Okay, so let's talk about another series called Untitled. So in 2020, you did Untitled 2, 2019, and that got first place in modern traditionalism. So you've switched categories. And there's an interesting story you mentioned about overdying with the Untitled series. So let's talk about that.
Well, the Untitled series is also, it's not really a series so much as when I can't come up with a name, I call it Untitled. But it is, that particular quilt is also part of a series where I was taking older work that I had in my rule of wanting to finish things. When I first got my long arm, I started taking tops that I wasn't very interested in. Maybe I didn't like the color. And I would quickly, relatively quickly at least, use the long arm to quilt them using a polyester thread, knowing that the dye that I use would dye the cotton, but not the polyester. So sort of thinking about what's going to happen if I over dye this piece and change the color, but also not really knowing what the end result would be. So it was a way of trying to save work that I had, put the time into piecing and try to save it and create a piece.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And there were things that came out that I wouldn't have planned. So I really learned a lot through doing that because there were some subtle interactions of color that I wouldn't have thought would have been effective, but that's where sort of the happy accident comes in and starts to teach you things. So
yeah. So let's touch for a moment on something you said about Untitled. So sometimes it's hard to come up with a name for a piece, but when I see something in the world that's untitled, I think, ooh, that's kind of outside my realm of understanding. And, can it be as simple as you couldn't come up with a name, or is there sort of an artistic reasoning behind it?
It's both. So in art school, which we were taught to be art snobs, but we were taught never to look at the label anyway, and that if you had to read the label, you weren't somehow sophisticated. And so there is an aspect, there is sort of a debate. Some people really like to look at the label first and then look at the quilt and have the label help them interpret the quilt. I like the idea of my work, somebody seeing my work and getting everything they get out of the work by something they're actually interacting with in the quilt. And so there are times that I don't want to label a work. It is easier to label a work with a name. It's easier to remember it. And for some people really want the title, that it helps them understand the piece. Mm-hmm. But there is part of me that would prefer all my pieces to be untitled. So it's a little bit of both.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk for a moment about categories, because you've entered many in minimalist design. You've also entered modern traditionalism. This next one I want to ask you about, 5x5 number 2. That got first place in the negative space category. So first, tell us about that quilt. And then second, let's talk about the different categories and how you decide.
Yeah, so 5x5, that is a series where I was making 12-inch blocks. And I was using scrap fabric. I tried not to think about the blocks. I tried to just sew things together. And then once I had a certain amount of blocks, I would arrange the blocks on the wall, sew them together, and then quilt them with this understanding that I would go through the same process where I would over dye them after quilting, mm-hmm. To help bring together the colors, because I was just grabbing whatever bright color I had left over in my scrap box. Yeah. I knew over dyeing them later would kind of bring them back into minimalism and kind of tone down the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so it was a way of introducing the happy accidents where you would get these surprise color interactions as the dye took differently. And that particular quilt is not 5x5 because there was one white on white print in a really terrible, compositionally not great place where it looked like it was white when I was piecing it, but then in the final thing, it just looked terrible to have the area that was printed didn't take the dye. So there was some white flowers in a not great place on the quilt. So,
right.
Which does happen when you're over dyeing. So.
Well, and it's fascinating to me that you're talking about over dyeing, which is adding another element, doing another thing, but to bring it back to minimalism. So that's kind of a cool concept, that you're taking perhaps a color scheme that is a bit more vibrant or busy, and you're almost dulling it down in a way, right? By making the colors go together with the over dye.
The way I approach minimalism tends to be more in line with that, I tend to start with a lot of things, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of ideas, and then I edit them down,
Yeah.
try to quiet it down. I don't start from a place of minimalism.
Yeah.
It's not how my brain works. I'm actually very sort of cluttered and yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of mess. So
Let's just dive in for a minute into those categories. So the three categories I see that you've entered over time are minimalist design, negative space, and modern traditionalism. So what's kind of the difference?
I mean, if you were to look at my work, there wouldn't be a big difference. I make a piece first and then I decide on the category. I'm not really concerned about entering a show. That doesn't enter my mind at all. So then once I have the quilt, I'm thinking about what category would it do better in.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of my work does use traditional blocks, or traditional, even the Passage series that's based on Amish bars quilts. So there's a lot of referencing traditional designs.
Yeah.
So if they're not fully minimalist, I might put them into modern traditionalism. That one that won was a drunkard's path type pattern.
Yeah.
And then negative space and minimalism can be very closely related.
Mm-hmm.
If there's something interesting going on in the negative space, so some sort of play between object and background, then I might enter it into negative space versus minimalism. That one, it could have been in either category.
Yeah,
So.
but that explanation sounds very clear. I understand it completely. Okay, so that's really kind of cool. So you literally kind of skipped a year and then went on to win like 11 awards at QuiltCon. But getting into Quilt National was also a big moment for you. So you told me a story about first seeing Quilt National back in 2001 in a book. So tell me the story of your path to Quilt National.
Yes, that was another one of those moments where somebody gifted me the book shortly after I graduated from college. So right when I was starting making quilts, it was really influential in my journey towards making quilts and also my journey of understanding quilts as art. Because when I started, quilts were very much a usable object. Because I went to art school and they told me anything functional or made by women wasn't art. So it was terrible. But Quilt National, that catalog really helped me see, oh no, wait, this is exactly what we were taught to do in art school. It just happens to be fabric.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a really important book in my development. And so entering the show and then finally getting into the show really felt like an achievement.
Yeah, I mean, not only was it another one of those seeds planted in your head, but it sounds like it was almost a permission for you. Like, yes, this is allowed. This is okay in my brain, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I looked at that catalog over and over and over again. So
yeah. Okay. So let's talk about Forest Through the Trees. That was a series as well, right?
yes. Yeah. So that series created around the same time, actually, as The Other Side. Was looking at sort of a view of coming from nature. So a lot of this started where I was out on a walk and I just saw some colors in the woods or the way the light was hitting, sort of fog coming through trees, and was really inspired to go home. And I just started painting on fabric. And so I created whole cloth quilts, or it was a big piece of fabric that I painted. And then I started slicing into them and inserting these straight geometric lines, which I realized after the fact was very much like the view that I saw looking through my deck. But I was thinking about this sort of push-pull between sort of the man-made world, nature, and also at the time I was transitioning from New York to Western Mass. So there was a little bit of a tension between sort of the woods and city and architecture. So
yeah. So A Forest Through one of the quilts in that series won an award at QuiltCon, second place in minimalist design. And you got into Quilt National as well. Mm-hmm. And we've already discussed the Untitled series and the Passage series. Those got into both Quilt National and QuiltCon. But tell me about Whitcross.
Yeah, so that is a new exploration, and actually really haven't fully explored it yet. It was sort of a one-off. Currently, there will be more probably, but a very similar process actually to Forest Through the Trees, where I had big piece of fabric that I painted dye on. So just kind of outside throwing dye at it, creating sort of a watercolor effect. And then for Whitcross, I then sliced that up and re-stitched it back together in order so that I can put the raw edges out so that you could have all the sort of fingers is what I think of them, but all the sort of texture from the raw edges and kind of break that pattern up. And then it's densely stitched in line with the stitching. So there's a lot of texture on that.
Yeah. I just love your desire to keep exploring and change it up. And I can't wait to see what you keep coming up with in the future. So one interesting little tidbit I don't want to skip over is that you had some involvement in QuiltCon 2026. So
Yes.
What were you doing there this year?
I had the opportunity to judge, which was a really wonderful experience. It's probably the first time I've seen every single quilt in the show and really spent time with every single quilt in the show, which was great.
It's a lot of work, right? But I bet it's quite an honor.
It is. It's overwhelming, but I felt, can't think of the word exactly, but there was definitely a feeling in the room that understanding how much work went into every single one of those quilts and people's hopes. And yeah, it was powerful to see all those pieces.
Yeah, there's a responsibility.
Exactly.
There's a responsibility there. Yeah. Okay, so let's move into some big news coming soon. So you have some wonderful events coming up. So tell us what's happening at Madeline Island in September.
Yeah, so I'm teaching a class. It's called Quilt Studies, A Pathway to Creative Discovery. And essentially, we're going to be working on quilt sketches. So we're going to be working small. And we'll probably spend the first 2 days making improv sketches, like 8.5 by 11 size, very small, really trying to work quickly and explore different ideas. And then also take the time to sort of understand, after we've made a few blocks, understand why are some working, why are some not working, and try to learn from that. Mm-hmm. But really the meat of the class is in the quilting section. So we will then actually quilt those in class, and we'll go through a design process, learning to sort of sketch out some designs, some things to think about from technical and design standpoint, and then actually stitch them out. And because they're small, really try to take some risks, play, have fun, learn from each other. So I'm very excited for that class.
Yeah, I love how your class ideas and the things that you teach give the artist in the class the permission to just explore, right? I love that.
Yeah, there is no wrong answer. It's just have fun, try things, the weirder the better. So
yeah, and the next one I want to chat about is Gathering of Stitches. So tell me about that.
Yeah, so I'll be up in Maine for the August session of Gathering of Stitches. And so if people aren't familiar, it's sort of like summer camp for quilters. So there's 3 instructors, and you'll break into groups and you'll learn from each instructor. So I will be teaching the same class, but 3 days to 3 different groups of people. And that is a class that we'll explore color. We'll talk about color, do what I consider sort of swatches, where we'll try different thread colors on different fabric colors and sort of play with density and see how that changes the effect. And then also just cover some sort of fundamentals of straight line stitching.
Yeah. Oh, sounds so good. Okay. So just a recap of those dates. Madeline Island is September 28th to October 2nd.
Correct.
And Gathering of Stitches is August 17th, 23rd.
Correct. Yes.
And of course, if you want to take any of these courses, you can Google them, Madeline Island, Carson Converse. It will come up for you for sure. And also Gathering of Stitches. Just Google it and you'll find it. I really encourage you to check it out. If you're in the area, if you'd love to travel, if you're looking forward to a dream class, that would be so fun. Okay. So Carson, what is on your design wall right now?
Well, lots of things. I use my design walls like inspiration pin boards as well as in progress. So I have a lot of small sketches. I have the beginnings of some quilts, probably 3 or 4 quilts. So I really use them. I put a lot of pieces that are in progress, and that's sort of how I decide what I'm going to work on for a day.
That is such a great idea. Like have it out there, have the inspiration up so you're always, being hit in the face by the possibilities, and then whatever catches your eye, you're in that moment where I really want to work on that today. Oh, I love that idea. Okay. And what's something you're dreaming of doing in the future?
Well, I'm working towards a solo show, ideally in a museum or gallery type setting. I've been working on some very big pieces and pieces that are connected. So pieces that really I'd love to sort of be able to surround a viewer with a collection of work, and so that there's a conversation between the pieces within the space.
Yeah, it's another one of those seeds, but we're actually
Yep.
putting it out to the world right now.
Yes.
This is going to happen one day. Wonderful. Okay, so now it's time for the lightning round robin. It's a series of rapid fire questions and it's super fun. Are you ready?
I am. Yeah.
Okay, what's your favorite tool or notion?
I don't know if it'd be considered a tool or notion, but my ironing board, it's 4 foot by 8 foot, and it's a game changer.
Oh, that sounds big and good.
Yeah.
Is there a certain type of padding you have on it and what makes it special?
I just used cotton batting, the thickest cotton batting, and then I stretched canvas over it. So it's plywood, cotton batting, canvas.
Yeah.
All just staple gun to the bottom, but
Yeah,
it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, the size makes a difference. Okay, what triggers inspiration for you?
Everything. But the process itself, it's just noticing while you're working, paying attention to what you like and following that thread.
Yeah. How many UFOs do you have going on at once in your studio?
Oh, so many. I probably have over 50, like, especially if you count small things, it may be more, but I have at least 12 full-size quilts that are unfortunately in progress. Yeah.
Well, it's so great to have so many things to choose from when you walk into your space.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, what motivates you to get out of bed in the morning?
I think I have this sense that there's so many ideas that I want to pursue and there's not much time. And I think that it's almost, unfortunately, a little bit of anxiety, but I want to see those things through. And so that kind of pulls me and gets me to the studio.
Oh, that is great. And what's a skill you'd still love to learn?
Quilting related, I'd like to free motion long arm.
Okay.
And then also I really want to learn how to make jewelry. So that's non-quilting related. So
yeah. Have you had any weird, crazy, or funny fan moments?
No, sometimes I've managed to hide my identity a little longer than some people. So I don't get many, but I have had somebody cry on me, and that's always a little weird. Like they just get sort of overwhelmed. So.
It's weird for someone who likes to keep a low profile, having a fan crying on your shoulder. Oh, that's funny. Okay. Has there been a mentor who's really influenced you along your journey?
Yeah, I haven't. There's been a few people in small tidbits. So when I first started, Denise Smith, I didn't actually know her, but she was a really important example to me as somebody who was doing it professionally. And so being able to go to her website and see what she was doing was critical in just understanding that there was a path towards what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And then Christine Perigo, who's a long arm quilter. When I purchased my long arm, she was just incredibly generous with her time. And I had looked up to her work, but then I was at QuiltCon and she took me through her quilts and she explained how she did everything. And she just was so generous. And I think it was a really important stepping stone for me in my work. And I still hear her voice in my head sometimes, sort of encouraging me. So that's was really important. And then a woman named Tracy Sawyer, who was from interior design, but she was a very important mentor for me within interior design, but she was also very good at promotion and networking. She also taught me a lot about pricing structures too, which was really important when I started my business. But she taught me about the concept of editorial content. So essentially, if you don't want to pay for advertisement, then you have to make something that somebody wants to talk about. And that's really been important for me as a business because I knew I wasn't going to be good at necessarily networking. Like I'm not really good at telling you I'm amazing or like going out there and, doing that. I don't have money for advertising. So the sort of the path in is try to make something that's interesting enough that somebody wants to talk about it. And so that sort of lesson from her was really important. That was not a rapid fire answer. But
No, that was great. I love that you have key figures in the different areas of your creative space, right? That's wonderful. Okay. Do you have any favorite collections of any kind in your home?
Yeah, I mean, I collect little things that make me happy. I have a lot of ceramics, sort of earthenware type ceramics or white shapes, a lot of like wood turn bowls and rocks and leaves and feathers and things like that. So
Yeah, fun. Okay, you're a gatherer. I'm
I
gathering
am a
you're a
gatherer.
gatherer.
Yes.
Okay, and last question in the lightning round, Robin. You've mentioned this, you've touched on it. Do you have any furry friends in your studio?
I do. Well, I have two dogs. They occasionally come. I do try to keep it a little bit secret
Yeah.
because cleaning up hair is kind of a pain,
Yeah.
particularly with the painting, but they do occasionally come to visit.
Okay, and what kind of dogs are they and what are their names?
They're Sydney and Neko, and they're both kind of black and tan shepherd mixes, like 55 pounds-ish. So.
Oh, how sweet. Well, thank you for braving the lightning round, Robin. That was super fun. So I've mentioned your website a few times at carsonconverse.com, where we can find your gallery and contact you. But where's the best place for us to find you on social media?
Instagram is really the only place.
Okay, and that's really
Carson
easy.
Converse,
yeah, that's just your name, so that's very easy at Carson Converse. Now, as we wrap up, Carson, what do you want people to take away most from our conversation today?
I guess I would say just the work, but trust your own sort of instinct, create work, follow what you're interested in. It does pay off.
Oh, I love that. Like kind of like find what you love, do more of that, just keep going, right?
Yeah.
What a great way to end the conversation. Well, Carson, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for sharing your story with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So that was my show with Carson Converse. What a great conversation. What stood out to me the most is how naturally she moves between art, design, architecture, and quilting without feeling like she has to choose just one. That kind of curiosity is such a powerful thing for makers. It reminds us that creativity doesn't have to stay inside one box. Sometimes the most interesting work happens right where those lines blur. One thing that really stands out for me about Carson is the volume of work she has put out over the years. She is a prolific creator, and although I don't think she'd ever say it out loud, I did a deep dive into past QuiltCon and Quilt National Awards, and she quietly holds the title of winning the most awards of all time. So this is no small achievement. If you are interested in collecting a Carson Converse original work, you can go to carsonconverse.com and explore the works for sale under the Collect tab. Carson's work feels modern and thoughtful, but it's also rooted in the traditions of quilt making. And I think that balance is what really draws me in. And today, I loved sharing the story of Carson Converse with you. Quilter on Fire is now on YouTube, and it's packed with brand new weekly content. What's waiting for you? Fun and easy tutorials to follow, exciting unboxings, exclusive interviews with top quilters and artists at the biggest quilt shows like Houston and QuiltCon. If you love Quilter on Fire on the podcast, you're going to be blown away by our YouTube channel. Don't miss out. Subscribe to Quilter on Fire on YouTube today. Let's ignite your passion for quilting. Thank you for listening to the Quilter on Fire podcast. Remember to rate, review, and follow us on Apple Podcasts. Your support helps me reach more quilters just like you, striving for that perfect quilty lifestyle. Click on those 5 stars and share what you loved most about today's episode. Don't forget to hit the follow button if you haven't already. With new episodes dropping weekly, you won't want to miss out on the inspiring stories and tips we have in store. Until next time, dream big and have fun in the studio with the Quilter on Fire.